Hello and welcome to Edie Extra, the new home for all of Edie's special audio features, building on our long-running Sustainability Uncovered podcast with one-on-one interviews, site visits, analysis, panels and more.
Hello and welcome along to the Edie Extra podcast channel from Edie, the place for special audio features about the hottest topics in environmental sustainability. You're listening to the voice of Siddhi Mittal, Edie's senior reporter. Today I ventured out into the streets of Marylebone in London to check out a pop-up shop of a fake brand with real clothes, created by environmental charities Action Speaks Louder and Serious People. Called mumumelon, the initiative aims to showcase that it is indeed possible to produce clothing with a clean energy-powered supply chain while making sure that workers earn a living wage. Joining me today is Ruth MacGilp, Senior Campaigner at Action Speaks Louder. Thank you for joining us, Ruth. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Thank you for having me.
You have built a fake brand, a flagship store, and a full supply chain in weeks. Walk us through the concept. Why move away from traditional corporate criticism or protesting to actually build a competitor brand?
So mumumelon is a satirical dupe brand, but it has real products, and the purpose was to prove to Lululemon that manufacturing with 100% renewable energy is totally possible today, even on a shoestring budget in a matter of weeks. And the purpose is ultimately to get Lululemon's attention and push them to respond to our campaign. So what we're asking Lululemon to do with this is firstly, to build a fossil fuel-free supply chain by supporting their suppliers to invest in wind and solar and electrification. Secondly, to invest in the communities who make their clothes, who face the worst impacts of the climate crisis. And then finally, to publish a real climate transition plan, which includes time-bound commitments and dollar amounts grounded in the climate science. So the reason we took this approach is because we know that more creative and emotionally resonant campaigns work far more effectively than traditional techniques and tactics like reports and petitions. And of course, satire has a really long history of holding powerful people and actors to account. But, it's worth noting that this approach we're taking comes after several years of direct engagement with the brand, investigative research, coalition building, but it was time to escalate. So what we're trying to do is kind of put a more positive focus on the solutions with this. And again, as I said, hopefully push them towards our ask.
That's really interesting. And I think it's the visuals are amazing as well. I've checked out the store and it looks so real. But I'm really interested in the technicalities of it as well. So you found wind and solar powered factories and living wage setups in a matter of weeks. How was your small team able to source what billion-dollar companies say is complex?
So obviously we're small. We actually only sourced a total of 43 products and we're not selling them to the public. But regardless, we did do a lot of research into finding the right suppliers for our purposes. And what we found was even for such a small order quantity, factories that use 100% renewable electricity are available. They're just a phone call away. They're just an email away. So this shows that kind of if you prioritize something like clean energy, sourcing decisions can be made towards that goal. Of course, it's worth noting that we're not asking Lululemon to simply, find all new factories that happen to have 100% renewables, but actually to support and help their existing suppliers to transition to renewables. And that's a power that Lululemon has as a multi-billion-dollar brand that we obviously don't.
Definitely. And I checked out the clothes and it said made in the UK, made in Wales, but like the other places as well. When you were looking for these wind and solar powered factories, was this a case of finding existing green facility in traditional hubs like in Asia, Vietnam or Taiwan, or did you have to look outside the standard apparel regions?
So we used our kind of industry connections to find two suppliers. One is in the UK, as you mentioned, one was in Pakistan. So two very different kind of energy landscapes. But obviously every region where Lululemon sources its own products, which are mostly in China and Vietnam, renewable energy, some kind of corporate renewable energy procurement is available. So whether that's rooftop solar panels, whether it's power purchase agreements or other mechanisms, these are available in the UK, in Pakistan, in Vietnam, in China, and the other locations that Lululemon sources as well.
And you've also developed a plan to fully electrify the supply chain by 2040. Is this like a proprietary secret sauce? Are you planning to hand this roadmap over to Lululemon and other brands as an open source guide?
So we have actually published the plan on our website, so it's publicly available. And as I said, it explains a timeline towards 2040 for what we would put in place if mumumelon was a real brand. So a brand that we wanted to electrify. And so the reason that we think this is so important is that even when garments are manufactured with 100% renewable electricity, it doesn't mean they're 100% renewable energy. And that's because the majority of energy consumption in fashion comes from heat, not electricity. So until those processes like dyeing and finishing and heat setting are electrified, that's how they can become powered with renewables. So the electrification plan that we've published draws from established industry research. It makes recommendations to Lululemon, and it recognises that not everything can be done all at once. This is a long timeline, but there are lots of steps that Lululemon can start to build today, like making public-facing commitments, investing in energy efficiency, and working with suppliers on pilot projects.
Electricity is one part of it, and then there's also living wage. You mentioned that the workers are earning a living wage, and made sure that across your supply chain. So how did you define that living wage for the specific regions, the UK and Pakistan, and then how much did it actually add to the cost of like a single pair of leggings or hoodie compared to the industry standard?
So the majority of the products are made by Community Clothing. They're cut and sewn and printed in the UK, and the fabric is spun and knitted in the UK as well. And according to Community Clothing, everyone involved in making their clothes is paid at least the national living wage, which in the UK is legally defined. Yeah, they're a really brilliant social enterprise actually, so I recommend checking them out. But in terms of cost, I mean, we're not selling the products. We obviously don't have comparable figures with Lululemon because we're not ordering massive quantities, you know, in these exclusive arrangements with suppliers. But, you know, if we were to sell these products, even at a very generous markup, they would be no more expensive than Lululemon's. Lululemon sell leggings for £100, so they were priced very reasonably. And then I also just wanted to note that Lululemon last year made $11.1 billion in revenue. 6.3 billion of that was gross profit. And their CEO, Calvin McDonald, who is leaving this year, received over $5 million in separation payments, while their founder, Chip Wilson, is valued at $7 to $8 billion. So the point I'm trying to make there is that they can definitely afford to ensure that their workers are being paid a living wage.
That's really interesting. The initiative does speak to a lot of bits and bobs about the fashion industry that can be improved. From this experiment, what is one thing that you think you have proven that a CEO or a head of sustainability can no longer use as an excuse?
We've proven that making athletic clothing with 100% renewable electricity is completely possible today. And then combine that with public disclosure, public commitments with a credible climate plan for the future going forwards.
We did talk about the opportunities here and like everything that exists out there that brands can use to decarbonize, but I also want to know if you face any infrastructure or physical barriers to actually scaling this initiative. So could you talk a bit about that as well?
Yeah, of course. I mean, we're not saying it's easy to transition from fossil fuels, especially where this factory is running decades-old equipment. You know, they're in challenging energy procurement markets. But again, Lululemon is a multi-billion-dollar brand, the world's leading yoga brand. So even though its supply chain is obviously more complex than what we're doing here, we believe it has a huge amount of leverage and influence in the supply chain. The technology exists, the economics are becoming increasingly favorable, especially with current geopolitical situation. Obviously, dependence on fossil fuels is becoming quite a business volatility. So a brand of Lululemon's scale has the influence, they have the power, and they have the capital to, at the very least, start the transition. We're not saying it's easy, we're not saying it's overnight, but we're saying put a credible plan in place. And we know that other brands have been able to do this, have been able to prove it's possible. You know, H&M put out their report recently about their investments in renewable energy and electrification. So we know that we're not asking for a complete unknown. We're not just picking this out of thin air. This is, grounded in what's economically and technically feasible.
I did see people were coming into the store asking all sorts of questions because they mistook it for perhaps, a known brand or just like a regular store. How has that interaction been? How have people reacted to the initiative? What kind of conversations have you had this morning?
Yeah, it's been very interesting. We are actually just 50 yards from Lululemon's own store here in Marylebone. So a few people think that we're maybe associated with Lululemon. It was April Fool's Day yesterday, so a couple of people are like, is this some kind of April Fool's? But generally the public has been very supportive when we explain what the campaign is about. Some of them are concerned about sustainability. Some of them wonder, what it is that Lululemon's doing that they should be concerned about. Somebody even came with a shopping bag from Lululemon that he was, feeling a little bit guilty about. But it's been interesting, and I think it's a very underreported issue in terms of fossil fuels in manufacturing, so we obviously want to get the word out to people, but some of them are disappointed that they can't buy our products, unfortunately.
With the products, do you have any plans of what you're going to do with the 43 products that you mentioned?
Yeah.
43 products that you have?
So we're collaborating with some yoga influencers, yoga teachers and content creators, and so they're using the products, our team are using the products, they're all being gifted, obviously nothing is going to landfill, so we'll all get a lot of use out of it.
That sounds great. This was a really interesting experience, and by the time this episode goes live, the pop-up will no longer be there, but hopefully, our audience will also enjoy this segment. Unfortunately, this is all the time we have for this podcast, so thank you so much for your time, Ruth. If you enjoyed this episode, you can subscribe to Edie Extra wherever you get your podcasts. We're on SoundCloud, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google, and YouTube. For today's episode, it's a goodbye from Ruth.
Goodbye.
And a goodbye from me. Goodbye.